It was a busy week for the president with the stock market, North Korea tweets, and fallout from the new book. One thing that might have gone under the radar has to do with election fraud. President Trump disbands his Commission on Election Integrity, saying many states wouldn't provide basic information. Critics say the fraud investigation was part of a campaign to make it harder for poor people to access the ballot box. And we're now joined by the Heritage Foundation's Hans von Spakovsky, who was on that now dissolved commission. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Is this a big loss for the country?
I think it is. The whole point of this commission, as prior presidential commissions, was to take a look at our voter registration and election process and to see what kind of problems are there, and if there are problems, recommend solutions for both state governments and the federal government.
But are there problems? Is there really voter fraud going on in this country?
We have a database at the Heritage Foundation where I work that's now up to 1,100 proven cases, voter fraud convictions from around the country. It could particularly make the difference in close elections, and we have close elections all the time.
There was one in Virginia this last week that was
right.
decided by putting two names pretty much in a bucket and pulling out the name of the winner.
Right, and there was a report earlier this year that in that district, one of the cities there, Newport Beach, had recently taken off several hundred non-citizens from their voter rolls, non-citizens who had cast ballots in prior elections.
Non-citizens.
So
they're not eligible to vote.
They are not eligible to vote. In fact, it's a felony under federal law for them to do that, and yet they were on the rolls and casting votes.
How does this happen in this country?
Well, that's one of the problems we were looking at. One of the issues is that election officials don't really do very much to verify the accuracy of voter registration information. One of the things they don't do is check to make sure that people really are U.S. citizens.
I know I live in Maryland. I can just go there. I'm registered, but I can just go
Right.
there and show up. I don't have to show anything.
That's exactly right.
I know there's a study out of the University of Loyola, Los Angeles, and a professor there found from 2000 to 2014, he investigated 1 billion votes were cast, and he said only about 31 known cases of impersonation. Is this really an issue, though, for this country?
It is an issue. He says 31 cases of impersonation fraud. We've got 1,100 cases in our database because that's not the only kind of fraud. There's all kinds of other things people do, from double voting to non-citizens voting to absentee ballot fraud. And we've got cases like that from all over the country.
Double voting, I know in Chicago there's always a joke, vote early and vote
Right.
often, but is this, people are actually casting two ballots? How is that happening?
We have a number of convicted individuals in our database, and what they were convicted of was registering in 2 different states and voting in the same election. You may recall just a couple of years ago, a candidate for Congress in Maryland named Wendy Rosen had to withdraw from the race after it was discovered that she was registered in both Florida and Maryland and had voted in elections in both states at the same time.
So really quick, what does the government need to do right now to investigate these issues now that the commission's disbanded?
Well, the reason it was disbanded was because we couldn't get a number of states to provide us with the data we needed, their statewide voter registration list, to start researching this. So it's going to be tough for the federal government to look at this. One of the things they ought to do is the Department of Homeland Security should look at non-citizens, people who've applied for citizenship, and see how many of them have actually illegally registered and voted.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.